Many of you have been shocked and appalled by the spectacular and striking anti-Muslim sentiment coming from 2016 Republican presidential candidates. But today, in our classic interview segment, I want to remind you that we've been hearing all sorts of crazy ideas about Muslims dating back a long time. Today's classic interview goes back to August of 2013. I interviewed this former FBI agent named John Guandolo, and he had a theory about CIA Director John Brennan. And that theory was, and actually that's the wrong word. I shouldn't call it a theory. I shouldn't call it a hypothesis. He had the idea that CIA Director Brennan is Muslim and that he has sort of pledged some kind of loyalty to the Islamic faith. It was completely nuts, but we're going to go back to it today. Let's enjoy it together. We are in 2016, going all the way back to 2013, my interview with former FBI agent John Guandolo. Joining me today is John Guandolo. He's a former FBI agent, also co-author of the book Sharia, The Threat to America, and author of the soon-to-be-released book Raising A Jihadi Generation, a handbook for law enforcement, military, and intelligence professionals. You can find out more at understandingthethreat.com. So John, it's really great to have you here. I'm fascinated by your career and your story. We actually first came across your name when we were doing a story about Glenn Beck talking about CIA Director John Brennan is secretly a Muslim. And we researched that claim, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you seem to be the kind of original source on that idea. Am I wrong or right about that?
No, that is correct, and thanks for having me on.
So how did you come up with that theory? Was it during your time at the FBI or after that you developed that?
No, well, I wouldn't call it a theory. It's two of the individuals that were over in Saudi Arabia when he was over there that are still in government service witnessed him take the Shahada, which is what you say to become a Muslim. While he was the CIA station chief in Saudi Arabia.
So who are those two individuals?
Well, I'm not going to tell you that. They're still in government service, and they would be fired if their names were public.
Okay, and let's say, even if you did tell, just for a second, like you're not going to tell us their name, but let's say you told us their names. What proof would they have that he is a Muslim?
Their own testimony that they were there present.
So they don't, there's nothing other than just that them saying they were there, right?
No, well, I mean, government records would show they were there in time of service at the time he was there, and they were present.
So in other words, if we were able to see the records, there would be records that show that the two individuals whose names you won't tell us were in the same place as John Brennan at a particular point in time, right?
Right.
And then what would that tell us about him converting to Islam?
That necessarily wouldn't tell you anything other than their testimonies, which would be that they witnessed him saying the Shahada.
Okay.
And my question would be, why isn't anybody just ask him, did you take the Shahada? That's all.
Tell me, let's talk about, well, that's an interesting question. Would there be anything bad? Let's say you're right, okay? Let's say these sources you won't tell us, who even if we knew their names would have no evidence about this. Let's say it was all true and John Brennan was a Muslim. What would be bad about that? In other words, is it illegal for people who work in American government to be Muslims?
No, but we do have a requirement that you're competent. And the focal point of the story, I suspect you know when you read and researched that, wasn't simply that he converted. It's that he converted as a sitting station chief for the CIA in Saudi Arabia, and the people who brought him to that were employees of the Saudi government and the Saudi intelligence service. That's a recruitment operation. And that shows that he is not competent or professional to be CIA, a station chief, number one. Number two, the director of Central Intelligence for sure. And I would argue he has no business having a security clearance.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that you're kind of tying in a lot of conjecture and personal opinions. In other words, it's your opinion. I mean, here, let me just in the interest of presenting another idea, and then you can tell me where I'm wrong. A lot of people would say, listen, John Brennan was arguably already pretty sympathetic to Middle Eastern culture, to Islam, before he even entered Saudi Arabia. That's why he was placed there. And would the Bush White House really give him such a high-ranking position if they thought that he was in some way compromised the way you're describing? It doesn't seem to make too much sense.
Well, I mean, the Bush administration gave Muslim Brothers senior positions in the government, so I don't know that that argument holds water. He was already very sympathetic, not just I think to the Middle East, but that's starting there, but even to the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas and others, and that's the problem. You know, one of the articles, one of the most supportive articles of the report that I did about John Brennan came out of the Middle East. And their whole argument was because of the fact that Mr. Brennan was allowed to go to Mecca, he had to be a Muslim because non-Muslims aren't allowed there. And they reported that. I didn't report that.
Okay, but just for our purposes, I want to focus on your reports because I only have you here. So let's see if we can focus on that a little bit.
Okay.
Is your sense that, do you think that Glenn Beck and other journalists, mostly right-wing journalists, are irresponsible when they repeat a story that you presented without giving the names of your sources and without those sources even having any kind of physical evidence that this even took place? Isn't it very irresponsible from a journalistic standpoint of someone like Glenn Beck to assume that you're right?
I'm going to leave that to you guys to discern whether reporters that put this out there beyond what I put out, that's up to you to come up, you know, with what you think of your fellow journalists. I will say this. There's an easy answer here. Why doesn't a responsible journalist ask John Brennan, did you take the Shahada when you were in Saudi Arabia? That's it. Just ask him and see what he says. And if he flat out denies it, then we have a discussion that we can have. But if he says yes, then this interview here becomes moot because he either has to lie, because I know for a fact the two people that are in government service are extremely trustworthy and have very stellar careers.
So you've never had a situation where someone you believed to be trustworthy turned out not to be trustworthy. You've never heard of that in your life.
Oh, of course I've heard of that.
So is it possible then that these two individuals could also fall under that category, but you just don't know yet?
I think when you take the preponderance of the facts, not conjecture, not theory, the preponderance of the facts, what has Mr. Brennan done since he's been in government service? Everything he's done, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, has been pro-Muslim Brotherhood, pro-Hamas, pro-Hezbollah in both policy, giving speeches, positive speeches at with known significant leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood here in the United States.
But what about all of the Christian members of Congress that are also supporting the Muslim Brotherhood financially and otherwise? Are they all Muslims too? Is that evidence that they are Muslims? I mean, in both cases, you personally have no evidence that either converted to Islam. So why aren't you talking about those members of Congress?
Well, you keep saying that there's no evidence. When you have witnesses, you know, I was an FBI agent, we take this stuff to court.
Yeah.
You have two people testifying to the exact same thing with the exact same details.
Right, but you don't have court testimony. You won't even tell us their names, and all they have is the fact that they say it. There's no evidence at all, and we don't even know who you're talking about.
Well, right, for the very reason that if I were to give you their names, their crap would be packed today, and they'd be out of the government.
Right.
Because of how hostile this message is, primarily because of men like John Brennan. You can't teach about the Muslim Brotherhood and Sharia law inside the government anymore, primarily because of John Brennan. Our foreign policy towards Libya and Syria, we supported Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood in Libya, and now we're doing it in Syria, primarily because of John Brennan. So when you ask what the evidence is our government is directly supporting Al-Qaeda That's the evidence.
Okay, yeah. I mean, our government, our government supported any number of brutal regimes, and it had nothing to do with John Brennan being a Muslim. But
But this does, and I'm not saying. Let me be clear. I'm not saying we supported Al Qaeda because John Brennan's a Muslim.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying when you look at the totality, there are individuals. Yes, I'm not naming them. I get that, and I get your issue with that. But they have given specific information that he said the Shahada while he was a station chief in Saudi Arabia, that he did it after a relationship was built with him by individuals in Saudi intelligence. It's a recruitment operation. He's so naive that he allowed himself to get put in that position. That's my concern.
All right, fair enough. No. I think we've heard it, and I wish we had more time. You've made your case, and I think the audience will decide. And of course, they can find out more at understandingthethreat.com. People can find out about the new book, Raising a Jihadi Generation. We have been speaking with John Guandolo. I wish we had more time, but I appreciate you coming on and talking to me about it.
Thanks, David. I really appreciate you having me too, and I do appreciate the discussion.
Thank you.